Hello and welcome. I'm Shellen Briand, and I have with me my special guest, Mike Goldman. And I have to start out by saying that most leaders watching this right now are lying to themselves. We think we're good people developers because we've got annual goals, we do evaluations, we do quarterly updates. But as Mike will tell us today, we are wrong. And Mike has spent years telling Fortune 500 CEOs those really uncomfortable truths. And he says that most business problems aren't actually business problems, they are people problems disguised as spreadsheet issues. And the reason that most companies are stuck in mediocrity isn't because they don't have the right strategy, but it's because they're pouring a lot of energy into the poor performers and really neglecting their best ones. And Mike is a very experienced leadership coach. He has worked with teams with companies like Disney and Verizon and Chanel, and he is the author of now 4 books. And his newest one is in pre launch right now, and it is The Strength of Talent: How to Grow Your People to Grow Your Profit. And one of the things I really appreciate about him is that he's also the guy that will, look a senior leader in the face and tell them that they are really approaching their talent wrong and be willing to speak the truth. But Mike, I welcome, and I'd love for you to tell us, what inspired you to write this book now, and just the topic. What inspired it for you?
My whole life, business life, which is most of my life, over the last, especially over the last 15 years or so, has been around creating great leadership teams, what I call a breakthrough leadership team. And that's been a part of my coaching, my speaking, the book I launched in 2020 was all about that. And what I've realized more so over the last 5 years is there is one piece of that. There are 6 pillars of building a great leadership team, and I won't take you through all those now, but there's one which is focused on assessing performance of your talent, coaching and developing that talent, making the tough decisions about talent that doesn't fit, re-recruiting those folks that aren't fit. That one is an area where most leaders struggle. And when I was out there doing my workshops, working with my clients, doing my keynotes, it's that one piece that people said, hey, Mike, what you shared there is different than what we were doing. It is somehow simpler, but more insightful. And where I could see how we can implement this in our organization. So I said, when I started thinking about the next book, I said, I really need to dig deeper into this whole area of the strength of talent and what I call my talent density model. I just knew I needed to dig deeper because that's what I was hearing from business leaders that they needed, is how to do a better job of growing their people.
One thing I appreciated in our earlier conversation is that as you wrote this book, you decided very deliberately to move away from the more intense work, coaching work that you're doing with teams and one on one and those strategic, to expand to also do more keynote kind of speeches, to leveraging an AI version of your coaching. What inspired you to do that?
Well, the first thing that inspired me to do it is I wanted to find a way to get out there and impact more people and more leaders. And whereas my work up until this last book was focused on how to create a great leadership team, that kind of narrowed my scope. I'm working with CEOs and their leadership teams. When I started writing The Strength of Talent and really digging deep on this whole area of growing your people so you can grow your profit, it hit me pretty quickly that the audience for this was bigger. It's not just CEOs and senior leaders, but anyone from the new entrepreneur to a middle manager, to a senior leader to a CEO, anyone who has other people reporting to them, or maybe more so, anyone who aspires to have other people reporting to them is going to get value from this message. And by me getting out there and doing more keynotes, I knew I'd be able to have more impact and get that message out to a lot more people.
Wonderful. And I had the opportunity to be exposed to the keynote, and it really impacted me from my past on leadership teams and also in the recruiting space of how infrequently what you share is discussed. And I think it'll be really exciting for people to hear. And one thing I wanted to start with was something that will probably make people a little uncomfortable. And that is that you share that most business problems are just people problems wearing business clothes. What does that mean?
Well, I use an example from the news right now. I live in New Jersey. So if you've been watching the news, you know that Newark Airport and United has been a god awful mess for the last few weeks. And I've had flights canceled and flights delayed. And what we hear is, well, what's the problem? The problem is it's a technology problem. It's they're working on one of the runways. It's they're short staffed in the folks, the air traffic control folks. It's a business problem. It's not a business problem. It's a people problem. And I don't mean that generically. What I mean is, this is, yes, we could say it's a technology problem, that we're using technology from the 1950s and 60s. If you look at the radar screens and what that looks like, it's not using the new GPS technology or satellites. It's technology from 70 years ago.
Amazing.
That we're using, which is frightening. Now, to me, is that a technology problem? No, that's a people problem. How did we get through the 1980s, 1990s, 2000? How did we get through all this time without anybody saying we need to upgrade the damn system? So it's a people problem. And the other thing I've seen over my 35 plus years as a management consultant and as a business coach, as a leadership team coach, is I have seen organizations with great strategies, but the wrong people. They fail every single time. A mediocre strategy with the right people succeeds as your people learn and grow and figure it out and either do a great job executing a mediocre strategy or figure out how to make that mediocre strategy a great strategy. So it's all about people. What we think is a business problem is always a people problem.
Mm-hmm. Those are those stories that stand out when you have that come from behind company that came out of nowhere and beats out somebody else that was a clear winner, and you find out more about their team. One of the stories that you share in your keynote that really struck me was some work that you did with 15 CEOs in Chicago. And you tell a story about asking them about how they're doing financially. And they, all of them give you incredible insights of results. They know their numbers, they know their metrics, all of it. And then you shifted to ask how they're doing with their people growth. And the way you described it is really impactful of just crickets. And somebody finally said, pretty good, I think. So break that down for us. What did that say to you?
So the real overriding message of my keynote and the new book coming out in October, the overriding message is the number one driver of profit growth is people growth. It's not a new strategy. It's not a new technology. It's not a new market or process. It's people growth. But there's a problem with that statement. There's a cliche that says you can't manage what you don't measure. And it's a cliche because it's true most of the time. So the number one driver of profit growth is people growth. Do we measure profit growth? Of course we do. And the story, Shellen, you're referring to is I do a lot of workshops with CEOs, and I was in Chicago with a workshop of CEOs, and I said, hey, how are we doing on profit growth? And around that room, everybody knew to the 10th of a percent how they were doing compared to last year and compared to plan. They knew it like it was a second language. But then I said, how are you doing on people growth? Pretty good. If you asked your CFO about profitability. How are we doing? And they said pretty good. They'd be on the street. You
Yeah,
would not accept that from
yeah,
your CFO,
yeah,
but we accept it. So the reason that's so impactful is because people say all the time, people are our greatest asset, but we don't act on it. There's a misalignment if you are looking at your revenue and profitability weekly, monthly, quarterly, but you're giving people annual performance reviews. There's something missing there. You're going to get more. You're going to improve what you focus on. And if we have no way to hold people accountable and actually measure how we're growing our people, then we're not going to see the growth we want.
yeah. Yeah, and those performance reviews and that process so often skews to underperformers, as leadership teams talking about those people, what are we going to do to move them up? And so often that leaves your top performers. And you have your experience from the past that you shared. What did your boss tell you when you were a
Oh
high
my goodness.
performer?
I hope he's, well, I was going to say, I hope he's not watching this. Maybe I hope he's watching, but, this was way back 1994, 1995. I was 30 years old. And I had started this job. It was in between consulting gigs at Accenture and Deloitte, and I went in and was building a brand new department for this company. And I blew away every goal we had. We were bringing revenue, and everything was great. And I was ready for. I was 30 years old. I wanted my next promotion. The problem was the company wasn't ready for that. The company wasn't growing fast enough to provide a promotion, but my annual review was coming up. So I thought, all right, here's where I'm going to get some insight. I'm going to get coached and challenged and maybe a vision of what's next for me. And my annual review, there was no feedback, no vision, no challenge. There were 5 words on my annual review. I kid you not. And those 5 words were, keep up the good work.
Yeah.
I've gotten better career advice from a fortune cookie than keep up the good work.
Right.
And that's the point that I made the decision that I need to leave and go somewhere else, because as a top performer in that company, I was being ignored. And I wanted to grow. And so many companies do that, where we ignore our top performers because we focus on those people that need us the most. And that makes logical sense. My low performers need me the most. The problem is when we focus so much on our low performers, what we're doing as leaders is we're spending most of our time trying to drag people up to average. And while we're trying to drag people up to average, what happens to our top performers? They get stale. Or they do like I did. They walk and they go somewhere else, because if your top performers don't grow with you, they're going to grow with someone else.
Yeah.
So what I see in leaders, and I did this myself as a leader before I learned better, is as leaders, we tend to over invest in our low performers and under invest in our high performers. And man, we need to flip that.
Well, that the danger of that is you're having your top performers leaving. You're having to spend so much time and money bringing in another high performer, potential high performer, who just gets put right in that same situation. Just such a difficult cycle. And what I didn't realize is that there was so much evidence, and there's been studies and research that, and really for all of us leaders, we should be very scared about this, that the results of the high performer are 3 to 1 to a low performer and up, depending on the studies that you look at. Could you break that down a little bit?
Yeah, so there's a study. I'll start with a more formal study, but then go into something that makes sense. Actually, I'm going to flip it, and I'll start with the thing that's not as much of a formal study. One of the things I learned actually from Tip Kendall, was the founder and CEO of the Container Store for many years, and he has this philosophy around people called 1 equals 3. And 1 equals 3 says one superstar performer equals the productivity of 3 mediocre performers. Now, I've seen there are certain parts of an organization where it's more than that. Someone on your senior leadership team is more than 3x. Superstar has more than 3x the productivity of a mediocre performer, just because of the sheer impact someone on your leadership team has out and down the organization. And that's why I think it's so important to have a through the organization. It means you could pay your superstars double. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you're a superstar, you could record this and use it as a negotiating tool, because you could pay your superstars double and still get better return on investment than a bunch of mediocre performers. Boston Consulting Group did a study, 1,200 companies, and found that the companies that identified as talent magnets, and those are the companies that scored highest in leadership and talent management, they grew their revenue 2.2 times faster, grew their profits 1.5 times faster than the talent laggards, the folks who didn't have as much focus on leadership and talent management. There is no marketing strategy. There is no new market. There's no technology that's going to give you that kind of return on investment. So, and the challenge is when companies get into some trouble, when business is down, one of the first things they throw away is their investment in people. And that's exactly the thing you need.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you don't sugarcoat things with the leaders that you work with, and you are known to tell people that keeping low performers around over a period of time is leadership malpractice. Can you tell us a little bit more insight of why you think allowing mediocrity is so damaging?
Yeah, and there's the obvious reason, right? The obvious reason is by keeping a low performer around. And by the way, there's two types of low performers in my model, in what I call the talent density model. There's the low producing person, the person who's low in productivity, and then there's the low culture fit person. And they're even more dangerous because they're not as coachable as the low producing folks. But the obvious reason why it's hurtful to keep those folks around, and I have seen low performers around for 1, 2, 3 years in an organization. And the obvious answer is, what impact are they having on your company? What impact are they having on the people around them? What impact are they having on your clients? That we know. I don't need to spend a lot of time on that. If that's you, you're screwing up and you're hurting your bottom line and you're hurting your clients. Here's the thing we don't think about. Keeping a low performer around hurts that person. It hurts the low performer. Trust me, they're no happier than you are performing at a low level, working on something that they may not have a natural talent for, trying to fit themselves within a culture that doesn't fit who they are. And one of the things that I often ask leaders related to this is, I say, do you believe this statement? And normally when I'm doing a keynote, I put this up on a slide. I say, everyone could be a superstar. Everyone can perform as a superstar. And I say, do we all agree with that? And maybe a third of the audience says they agree, and 2/3 of the audience looks at me and says, all right, I just figured out this guy's a moron and he doesn't know what he's talking about. And then I kind of hit my clicker and the next word says somewhere. Mm-hmm. Do we believe that everyone has the ability to be a superstar somewhere? Mm-hmm. Now, that I believe. Do I believe that, could I be a superstar basketball player? I'm 5'4". I am not going to be a superstar basketball player. So everybody could not be a superstar anywhere, but could someone be a superstar somewhere? I believe that not only as a leader, but as a dad. Mm-hmm. I have a son that's got Asperger's syndrome. So I saw a story on the news that was near and dear to my heart a few years ago, that there was a high-tech firm hiring only autistic adults to do their system testing for their computer code. Mm-hmm. Because those autistic adults had such a great ability, way better than I can, to hyper-focus and obsess on making sure that code was right, testing the things, each thing, and just doing that in a redundant way and focusing on the details. I couldn't do what they do. So, genius is not generic. Talent is not generic. It's specific. It's contextual. So by us keeping these low performers around, we're actually hurting them. And if that is helpful to you in getting you off your butt to maybe have the difficult conversation you haven't had, then that's something you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and having those difficult conversations and then feeling confident that there's a way to have a better outcome over and over and over. Sometimes it's just so much work to get somebody back on the team and it may or may not work. And that's one of the reasons that I think your book and your message around what you've designed, the talent density indicator, is so valuable, is that it will be a tool that helps somebody know that they can actually measure and adjust and feel comfortable that they have something that is systematized. So, can you tell us about your indicator model?
Yeah, I'm super proud of the TDI, the talent density indicator. And I'll go back to something I said earlier when I said the number one driver of profit growth is people growth, and that we measure profit, but we measure profit growth, but we don't measure people growth. So part of the measurement is having specific expectations using key performance indicators for each of your people. But bigger picture, like we have a measure for profit growth, we need what's our people growth measure? And it doesn't exist. So I've created in my talent density model, I help my clients, and I do this with my clients, I do this in my workshops, and I even do it in my keynotes, is my audiences and my clients figure out using this model who are their high performers, who are their medium performers, and who are their lower performers. When they do that, there's a very simple calculation that I teach them that comes out of it. It's so simple that I'll teach you now. Very simply, it's the percent of your folks that are high performing minus the percent of your folks that are low performing, either low productivity or low culture fit. When you do that, you wind up with a number between negative 100% and positive 100%. If you've got all low performing folks on your team, you're at negative 100%, 0% high performing minus 100% low performing. If you're all high performing, you're at 100%. If you've got all medium performing folks, you're at zero because it's zero minus zero. So that calculation, what that allows us to do is it allows us to go beyond how are we doing with people growth? Pretty good. Is to say my TDI is 27%. And my goal in the next 90 days is to get that 27% up to 35%. We need a benchmark. We need a goal. We need some way to hold our people accountable, our leaders accountable for building strength of talent, building talent density within their organization. And by having a measure, we have the ability not just to say, I'm taking action. All the action I said I'm re-recruiting my people. I'm challenging my people. I've coached 2 people out of the organization. I'm changed a couple of roles. Not just am I taking all the action. We could take action and not see the results we want. Mm-hmm. The talent density indicator helps us understand whether we're actually seeing results in performance.
Well, and having that multiplier effect of knowing that as you have more high performers on your team, that they're going to be that 3-to-1. There's just, exponential value.
Absolutely.
So that was one of the things I appreciated about the keynote experience, was actually going through this model and being able to write down the names of the team and get the scores and really walk away feeling empowered that there was, something coming out of that session, which was different than most keynotes that I've been a part of, that I really appreciate. But your book really dives into the details, and it is launching in the fall. But you have a pre-launch right now, and you're doing some value around those that do pre-order, quite a lot of bonuses. Why don't we just take just a moment for those that are sort of inspired by what you're saying, can relate to it. They can take the opportunity to use the QR code, or I will put the link in the comments as well, to pre-order. But what do people get when they pre-order?
Oh, I've got to try to remember now. But when they pre-order, They will get access to a LinkedIn community eventually when that goes live. It's not quite live yet. There is a something called the Talent Density Quick Assessment, which is a way of them assessing their team and getting a great report on what actions they ought to take. There is a set of tools. So the book talks about how to set expectations for your team members, how to assess performance against those expectations, what actions to take, how to hold each other accountable, how to cascade it through your organization. And with each part of the process, there's a set of tools and resources. So if you pre-order the book, you will get first access to all of those tools and resources. You will also get the ability to upgrade to a bulk order. And that's not just, hey, do you want 50 books? But each one of those bulk orders, there are different packages that come with implementation calls with me or a workshop I do with your leadership team, access to a web-based application that I built to help automate all of this and help you hold people accountable. So pre-ordering really gives you a chance to get just thousands and thousands of dollars in value that once the book is out there and is live and is no longer in pre-order, a lot of that goes away.
Fantastic. One of the other things is an AI version of Coach Mike. And this is something that a year ago wasn't even possible. And I tested it out because one of the challenges of having a keynote or workshops or trainings or reading a book is that you always, leave enthusiastic and you're going to try. And then it's, life is busy and you kind of forget. And it was so fascinating to be able to, come to the AI version of you and say, this is the situation that I'm dealing with. How would you advise me? And it was fantastic to get that advice and to be able to bring that through. And having had former sales teams, that the opportunity for our leadership team to have come and use that kind of coaching was great. So that was a unique thing that you had the opportunity to do now that AI has arrived on the scene.
Yeah. And by the way, this may not be me. This may be my AI. I mean, my AI is smarter than I am anyway. So you may be better off.
I love it. I love it. So one of the things that is certainly going to ruffle a lot of HR leaders' feathers is you have said that the annual review is just one of the worst inventions ever. Why do you say that, and what do you propose that people do instead?
First, I'll correct you and piss people off more. Not one of the worst inventions ever. I believe annual performance reviews are the worst thing ever invented in business. Imagine, I'm a baseball fan. I'm from the Bronx. I'm a Yankee fan. Imagine you're a manager of a team, of a baseball team, and you've got somebody on your team that all year is just in a slump, not hitting. They're doing horrible. You wait until the season is over in October to pull that person aside and say, I've been noticing since April. Here's what's wrong with your swing. Let's fix it now so you can do better next season. It's ridiculous. Not only would a professional baseball manager not do that, you wouldn't do that as a coach of a little league team. And yet we do that in business. And I talk to audiences about this. One of the big laughs I typically get, and an uncomfortable feeling by some people, is I see people that have a little smirk on their face when I'm saying this and they're doing this. And I say, some of you in the audience think that's why we do quarterly performance reviews. And my answer is, great. You do a crappy process 4 times a year. It's such an outdated, horrible process when what people really need is coaching and development and feedback and accountability all the time, not some magical point at the end of the quarter or the end of the year. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. So many of the people that you work with are leaders and they're on leadership teams, and many companies have been getting leaner. They're wearing lots of hats. They're just kind of running ragged often. They're meeting, coaching sessions. They're canceling those, rescheduling them. There's a lot of change happening. They're looking at their phones during it. So from a leader perspective, what would you say to that leader who's just saying, I have so many demands, I just don't have time to do all of these one-on-one coaching sessions and meeting with people this way.
Yeah. So what you're referring to is the importance of a leader. I think weekly, at worst, bi-weekly, having one-on-one meetings with each of their direct reports, and not just one-on-one meetings. So, Shellen, how's it going? Everything okay? Do you need me or anything? Okay, great. I've got to run. But productive meetings, and in my model, and it's not the only model, but it's one I know works. There are two types of meetings. One I call the accountability and feedback meeting. That's a meeting where, as the leader, it's your agenda. And that's where you're holding people accountable, giving people feedback on their quarterly priorities, on their projects, on their KPIs, on their core values, behavior, culture fit. And then the second type of meeting, and you kind of switch off between the two, is the coaching meeting, where it's the person that's reporting to you, it's their agenda to come in and they're asking for help. And I believe, and actually, I'm going to steal this from Marcus Buckingham, who's written a lot of great books, strength-based leadership. And I saw an interview with him a few years ago, and he said, think about how many productive weekly one-on-one meetings you could have with your direct reports. If your answer to how many can I have is, I could do that with 15 people, then congrats, you could have 15 people directly reporting to you. If you say, you know what, I am so busy that I can't have regular one-on-ones with anybody every week, I just have too much stuff to do, then you should have 0 people reporting to you. That's how important those one-on-ones are. And if you do that, then you don't need a quarterly performance review, an annual performance review, because every week, in addition, obviously, to informal feedback and coaching, right, but every week people are getting coaching, feedback, accountability.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wish that we had hours to keep on talking. You have so much rich information, and getting your book, your new one, getting the 3 that you've written, enjoying some of the content that you have out there is a great way to learn more. But what would you say to the person who this is either a new way of thinking or a reminder about the importance of people development? We're almost to the long weekend, and when they come back on Tuesday, what would you say is the most important action somebody could take? Not just sort of what to think about, but really what action should they be taking?
Yeah, the very specific action is to make sure that when you think of your team and your direct reports, and by the way, if you're listening to this and do this upward management versus downward, but if you're a leader, think about your direct reports and do the work yourself and with them to make sure that your expectations are crystal clear. If you're a CEO and the chief marketing officer reports to you, how are you measuring success of marketing? Is it that the new website went live on time? Is it that the new logo looks great? Or we got a bunch more Instagram followers, or a bunch more people clicked on our email campaign? Or is it we are seeing consistently at least 15 new marketing qualified leads per week? Now, I don't know what the answer is for you, but I hope it's something closer to the 15 marketing qualified leads per week. Yeah. The most productive thing you can do is work with your team members to make sure you've got crystal clear expectations. How are you measuring success? Make sure there's alignment and understanding to that. Mm-hmm. That's the first step.
Mm-hmm. It's fantastic. And how can people connect with you, follow you, get in touch with you if they are interested in learning as being in your community, or if they are looking for specific, expertise that you have to bring in for their team or for a keynote or workshop?
Yeah, the best place to go, the home base for everything Mike Goldman, is mike-goldman.com. Goldman.com. I couldn't get Mike Goldman. Some guy who was in Big Brother in Australia stole that URL, but it's mike-goldman.com. In there, you'll see more about my coaching, my books, more. There's a page dedicated to the keynotes that I do and the workshops that I do. So that's the place to go. And then, of course, the QR code that looks like it's back up on the screen for the new book that I'm super, super excited about. It's strengthoftalent.com.
Oh, I love it. And these days of AI, and the beauty of being able to get an AI coach, Mike, but also there's so many employees who are really worried about what AI is doing to their jobs and how this is going to impact that people development. That human connection is even more important today and will become even more so, because that's the piece that we get to bring, and the leadership that we get to bring to our teams to develop people and really stand out from the competition. So, Mike, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And I'm excited to see your book on the shelves.
Me too. Thank you. This is great. It was fun.